I don't think it looks really much like Berkeley, but kind of. More Berkeley than.
I'm not good news for them. Okay.
Yeah. I think I heard that right now.
I don't have time right now.
All good.
Thank you.
I'll make a home sign to watch this. Second and third reading.
Kind of purposely delaying.
We just want to move the delegation to a later agenda item, Your Worship.
Good evening. I bring this regular meeting of council on Tuesday, October 26, 2021. Call to order. Is there any public input?
None has been provided, Your Worship.
Thank you. And the adoption of the minutes, 4.1. I need a mover that the minutes of the regular council meeting held October 12th, 2021 be adopted. So second. And Christopherson and White. There is no public hearing. And what I should have done in the beginning was ask that the 6.1 Rocky Mountain Rangers be moved to further down into the agenda to give them time to get themselves organized and here. And we need a mover and a seconder. Adjourned and fair, that they be enabled to move further into the agenda. And all in favor? Opposed, none. That was unanimous. So there is no unfinished business, and that brings us to bylaws, number 8.1, fees and charges amendment. We've had 3 readings previously. This is now presented for adoption. Do I have a mover?
So moved.
Second.
And Lunk and Christopherson. And anyone want to speak to this? All in favor? Opposed? None. 8.2, the Revitalization Tax Exemption Bylaw, introduction by staff, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think I was expecting to get here quite so quickly in the evening. So, as you're probably aware, the City of Merritt has a revitalization tax exemption, which is designed and intended to encourage revitalization of the local economy. The idea behind a revitalization tax exemption is that basically you might be in a situation where you have industry who are not sure about whether, or other kinds of development, which are not sure about whether or not they would be well served by going to a particular community, and then the revitalization tax exemption can help steer where they would go in that area and try to encourage particular types of development and economic activity which council believes would be advantageous. From a staff point of view, we are not convinced that the revitalization tax exemption bylaw, as it's currently working in Merritt, is meeting those goals and those intentions. So section 226 of the Community Charter is the section which allows you to exempt certain properties from taxes in order to encourage revitalization. And we currently have the 2016 bylaw, which is attempting to do that. So this is about a 5.5-year-old bylaw at this point. There are two areas of the city which are covered in the existing bylaw, one for the downtown core, the specific revitalization area, and there's another one for just, which is appropriate across the entire city, that's the general revitalization area, and it allows applicants to request an exemption from local taxes for a 4-year period, where they progressively pay a larger proportion of the taxes that they would normally pay. Up until when the exemption expires, they are on a regular tax regime. And then there are some requirements that they have to fit into, which for, say, the downtown area, it's simply that they have construction value which exceeds $20,000, meet city design guidelines, and be something which requires a building permit. So that is the vast majority of construction. So far as we're aware as staff, the exemption is not currently encouraging the kinds of revitalization that you would like to see. It is simply appears to be functioning to provide a benefit for activity which would be taking place whether or not this exemption program existed. And therefore it's not particularly advantageous to merit taxpayers for it to be here, because it isn't encouraging increased economic activity, but it is resulting in taxpayers subsidizing activity which would be taking place anyway. There have been some high-ticket exemptions in recent years which have somewhat reduced the city's income, and as staff we don't believe that the exemption program particularly encouraged those activities to come forward. It simply resulted in the reduced income. And obviously if you make any changes, then all the applications which are currently either in the pipeline or currently benefiting from the program would continue to be in that situation. This wouldn't change anything retroactively. That said, we believe as staff that we can design a better program which would be better at meeting its needs and would encourage more revitalization and particularly more appropriate downtown activity. And so we're asking to bring forward a bylaw at this point where so I think the 4 resolutions we're asking for votes on tonight would be to read a bylaw which would simply repeal the existing revitalization tax exemption bylaw, and then also to provide us with instructions to go out and do the research and preparation to bring a revised tax exemption bylaw program forward, which then would be presented to you and you would have the opportunity to guide and develop any new replacement. So if you have any questions or would like further information, I'm here, Mr. Smith and Mr. Anderson as well.
Are there any questions for staff? Councillor Luck.
No, I thank you for bringing this forward, Mr. Lewis. I think this is totally appropriate for what we're looking for in this city here. And sometimes these tax incentives come back to haunt you, and this one has. And so I think there is other ways which we've discussed in Committee of the Whole about getting tax incentives to the industries, and not even tax incentive, but just the importance of having an overall lower tax rate for the whole city, for the whole business department, so we're not kind of giving benefits to one over another one and that kind of thing. And I think there is other ways that we can bring business here to the city of Merritt. I mean, you look at the land cost, servicing costs, location for one thing. Speed of development application process and utility fees are all other ways that we could certainly be looking at providing incentive to get businesses into our community. So I fully support this, and I'm looking forward to see what staff bring forward for further recommendations. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Councillor White. Did you have?
No,
Okay. Anyone else? This was questions for staff. Mr. Smith.
Your Worship, there was just one further point that I wanted to add that I think really shows where we could be going with this program. As Council's aware, there's been 3 applicants to the program, and the dollar is given relative to the size of our community, and that's part of what we'll bring back with the new bylaw. I think are probably more substantial than what you could be doing and given to a smaller number, and given to a relatively few number of people. Whereas I think that through broadening the program and potentially even making the tax incentive larger for the areas that you target, but if it's in a class such as commercial or residential where the tax burden isn't as significant to start with, you can offer a more exciting tax proposal that will actually have a better overall impact on the city's budget as well. Because part of this, and there was a brief conversation about this earlier today with some of you, is that this can be used for revitalization, and the fact that really encouraging and incentivizing business owners to do some of the facade improvements and other things that we've all wanted to see. And I think that if you have the right tax exemption in place and have the targets in place where this is something that we know we're going to be able to afford and have select targets, and allow council a little bit more flexibility in what that tax structure is going to look like, depending on what the advantages they bring to the city are, is going to be a huge win for you in really driving the types of initiatives that you want to see. So thank you for allowing me to add a couple extra comments.
And my hope is that, I mean, you've heard from council in the past about what we're looking for, but I hope that we still have input into this before it's final.
Absolutely.
Before it comes back to the table. Councillor Adjourned.
Currently, we have exemptions for what, up to 4 years? Were we planning on going with the same amount, or would it be kind of a general, depending on the size of the project?
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, likely 4 years might be appropriate in some situations, but lots of communities are looking at 10-year exemptions for the specific things that they're looking to target. And those 10-year exemptions might be blanket for 10 years. They might be graduated in the same way that ours are. So we'll be proposing a couple different regimes that are used in other communities and making some recommendations as to what we feel is going to really offer the best value for the taxpayer dollar. Because ultimately these are subsidies provided by taxpayers, and they want, and I think you want, the taxpayers to know that those are being well used. So there will be a number of different options that come back with that, Councillor Adjourned.
Councillor White.
So we're not taking the incentives away completely, like just redoing it.
What we are recommending is that we take it away completely in the interim, and that you direct us to go bring a new one. The idea here is that if we were to bring an amendment right now without going through the consultation process with council, that we could probably rush and make that happen. But in the interim, we want to ensure that with some of the tax changes that council has already made to, for example, you made a very substantial reduction to the light industrial tax rate in this past year. And part of the idea with that is reducing the tax rate. Now, if you have that reduced tax rate coupled with the revitalization tax exemption, if an application were to come in, that would be a more problematic situation. So we're proposing to repeal it so that everybody knows that this is off the table for the interim, with the asterisk that we're going to be bringing something back. And as Greg noted in his report, everyone who's already received a revitalization tax exemption will continue to do so. It's not stopping the existing practices. It's just allowing new applications.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Luck.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Adjourned.
I was wondering if with the new bylaw that you're proposing, if we can have maybe a graduated amount for the different classes, because you have 4 categories listed, and maybe for the residential units over 75, maybe it could be a certain number of years, where maybe for light industrial we want to do it on a...
That is a possibility. One thing that we're going to try and do for you is, and I think Greg's pulling this up, we would really like to help council preserve as much flexibility on this as you can. And if we prescribe everything in the bylaw, part of this is you have to enter into a bylaw, then you have to have a separate agreement, and then we issue a certificate, an exemption certificate. So there's kind of 3 parts to the process. What I think many communities are moving towards is setting down some of the firm terms in the agreement itself instead of prescribing everything in the bylaw, so that council has the ability to say, okay, there are a number of jobs, you're bringing in extra amenities, you're going the extra mile on things, we feel comfortable extending such and such an exemption. Whereas in another circumstance, you might be more inclined to offer a lesser exemption if there's less direct benefit to the city. So I think that there is some inherent subjectivity that I think you're probably going to want to proceed with, but we also want to have enough certainty in the bylaw that people are going to have a rough idea of what they might be able to get through this process. So we're going to be trying to strike that balance as well as possible for you.
Perfect, thank you.
I have a question. Other work requiring a building permit. We talk about specific area projects having an excess value of $20,000 currently, and other work requiring a building permit. Now, can you tell me what a building permit, what's the minimum amount that you need to be, or that you require a permit for?
So there isn't a dollar value that requires a building permit. A building permit is triggered by the type of work that is being done, as opposed to any dollar threshold.
So it's not usually just painting?
Painting doesn't require a building permit.
Fencing?
No.
It is actual structural changes to build?
Yeah, that's the simplest way of putting it.
So, Your Worship, the building bylaw that we have at the city, Section 5, let's just say, holds a slew of things such as construction of a building, moving various buildings, demolishing buildings, and then Section 6 of this bylaw requires that none of those can begin until a permit has been issued. So it's things which are captured in that bylaw.
Okay. Okay. I just had a question and I needed an answer, but thank you, you did that. Councillor Luck?
I was just sitting here thinking about this, and I think I'm wondering if this might be a great way to incentivize. Here, council does a lot of work.
Is this debate, or is this still questions for?
No, it's a question. I'm just running some groundwork here. We've done a lot of work around the council table and getting some project approved, and the next thing we see that they're bundled up and sold off. Is there some way of inputting into this agreement that this incentive is tied to first in project or something? Like you can't do all this work, get the incentive, and then sell it off? Some way of incentivizing these developers to get moving and putting shovels in the ground now? Mr. Smith, is there
Yes,
some way of
Greg,
adding an incentive like that in there? I may not have seen something.
Scroll down to, I think it's in 6. Yes, council may enter into an agreement with the owner of property respecting C, any conditions on which the tax exemption is to be provided. So you can, in that agreement, stipulate certain conditions that are requirements in order to receive said tax revitalization exemption. One of the beautiful things about this is it can, even if it's for provisions that are already in place. For example, there have historically been times where there's been challenges with landscaping. We take security, maybe the landscaping gets done, maybe it doesn't get done. Well, if you want your tax revitalization exemption, your landscaping needs to be completed. If you're an industrial project, you need to have proper screening, whether that's in the form of trees, your fencing, to be able to ensure that council is getting the types of things that you want, that the community wants, that the community is going to value, that you're getting some value out of this. So in addition to kind of extras that you might be looking at, I think that you're right, there's potential. I don't have anything kind of offhand for how we can make that work, but absolutely council can put particular conditions on the receipt of that.
Nice. Good, thank you for that clarification.
With the current one or new?
You have the ability to do that now. The issue is that
But we have that step.
it's fairly your bylaw right now is fairly prescriptive in some ways, but you do still have to enter into an agreement, and there is an opportunity for you to enter into conditions now.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, is anyone have something else to say other than questions for staff? Debate happens now. Wow.
All the questions.
Okay, Councillor Lucky, you're, okay. Okay, well, it's probably clear from the questions, but you have it. Councillor Banger.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose there's no debate because I think we all strongly feel this is something that's needed, and we appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with staff. This bylaw does not provide the city with a targeted economic approach. I think we really need to look at that and to better utilize the taxpayers' dollars above everything else. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Your Worship, I apologize.
Make the motion?
Oh,
Correct!
okay.
Thank you, Councillor. You don't even need
I
me.
have one more councillor to speak. Councillor Fair.
Thank you. Yeah, I too am excited about the potential for this. I think the bylaw could do a lot of good. And I do wonder a little bit if there is or will be some consultation of the businesses to determine how the exemption could best be utilized. Because, I mean, it's one thing for us to put measures in place, but if they aren't sort of doable and attainable for the businesses, then, you know, I think that is just a key part of it.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder. And before
Can I ask a follow-up question with that, Your Worship? Would that be appropriate?
Sure.
Through Mayor Brown to Councillor Fair. Council would have the opportunity to provide additional direction in relation to this motion, and I think one area that we would appreciate that, absolutely, there can and should be some consultation, whether it's an open house or a committee of the whole before it comes for first reading, something to that effect. But my question is, do you envision us consulting before we bring a draft bylaw, or we bring a draft bylaw and say, what would you think? What do you think of this? And then bring it back for changes. Consider that, and if you would like to make a motion in relation to additional consultation prior, you can.
And I think that's something we can decide on even after we repeal. I think that's just...
Correct. It would be in relation to the fourth,
Yeah.
the fourth item. So.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Councillor Fair. What I did want to mention to our guests is that you're on our agenda. We're just, after we finish this motion, we'll get to you. Thank you for coming. So I need a mover that council and read the revitalization tax exemption repeal bylaw number 2321 for a first time. 2021, a first time.
So moved.
And so we have Christopherson and White. Anybody want to speak to this? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And I need the same for the revitalization. My tongue is not working tonight. The revitalization tax exemption repeal bylaw 2321-2021 a second time.
Second.
So I actually had luck enter. And any comments? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And the council read revitalization tax exemption repeal bylaw number 2021 a third time. Edgeworth Christopherson. And any comments? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried.
That's why we have 3 readings, Your Worship, so by the time you get practice.
And that council directs staff to draft a new revitalization tax exemption bylaw with an emphasis on downtown revitalization.
Second.
Luck and White. And Any comments on this one? All in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay. And welcome to the Rocky Mountain Rangers, and we appreciate you coming on such short notice. We know that we had provided them with a different time frame, and they weren't prepared for this earlier meeting, but thank you for making the effort to come. So it's Lieutenant Corporal Amadeo Vecchio and Lieutenant Desmond McMillan. I don't know how you're going to Lieutenant Colonel Vecchio, this is you at this point in time.
Your worship, with your permission, may I take off my mask?
Yes,
If that's okay with everybody here?
that is.
Good, thank you. First of all, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Amadeo Vecchio. I'm the commanding officer of the Rocky Mountain Rangers. We're garrisoned in Kamloops and in Prince George. I have Lieutenant Desmond McMillan. He's my officer commanding headquarters company. He is a naval intelligence officer attached with my unit here. I should know, just kind of preface sort of thing, that we are a reserve unit, so I have full-time regular force people within the regiment. We also have civilian occupation. I'm a senior officer in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. That's what I do in my civilian job. There. I'm stationed as working in Kelowna Detachment as a use of force instructor and a patrol NCO. Lieutenant McMillan is a lawyer on City Street. Well, so if your worship, on behalf of the regiment and council and members present, thank you for allowing us to grace City Council, and I hope you find this presentation fruitful. It kind of gives you kind of a thumbnail sketch on what we do, and I would encourage some open dialogue and questions that you may have, and hopefully myself and with Des, we can answer them, your worship. Again, thank you for hosting us.
And are you able for us to interrupt you, or would you rather have our...
100%. So please do.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, we have permission now? All right, so the Rocky Mountain Rangers. If you go back to the first slide, our cap badge there, it's a ram, and we are the Rocky Mountain Rangers. Not too many units in Canada have that in front of them. It's a title given by the Queen, and our motto is Clock Manage, which is a weapon for ever keep a sharp lookout or ever watchful. There's 2 iterations of it, and if you folks have a copy to get our 100th anniversary, that was promulgated in 2008. In there, our centenary, in there, there's different iterations of it. So, next slide. Yeah, what is the Army Reserve? Just to kind of paint it, the Canadian Forces, and if I may, are the Canadian Armed Forces. So you have the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army. Those are regular in there. As those regular components, there are reserve components. There's an Air Reserve, a Naval Reserve, and then there's the Army Reserve. And as such, the Army Reserve is based on across Canada. So you have the Army of the West, as it's called it, from Thunder Bay to Lakehead to Victoria, which is 3 Canadian Division. Ontario, you have 2 Division, 3 Division, and 5 Division. Sorry, 4 Division and 5 Division. Quebec and the Maritimes, respectively. They used to be called Army of the West, Central Area, Sector de l'Est, and Atlantic. But 10 years ago, we went back to our roots from World War II, 3rd Canadian Division. So as such, you'll see that 3rd Canadian Division members wear the French gray patch on here. Where in Ontario, they wear green. In the Atlantic, they wear maroon. And in Quebec, they wear green, as such. And we went back to the pips and crowns, because our genesis is the British Army, for lack of a better word. So as such, we wear pips and crowns instead of stripes, as Lieutenant McMillan has on his. So in the Army of the West, you have 3 Canadian Division, which headquarters in Edmonton. So you have a regular force brigade, and then you have 3 reserve brigades, 39 Brigade, which is British Columbia, 41 Brigade, which is Alberta, and 38 Brigade, which is Saskatchewan and Manitoba. They augment the regular Army for domestic operations and expeditionary operations. So 39 Brigade, patches here on our uniform here, since we have our new uniforms in the last 15 years in there, so our emblem is the cougar. So the primary reserve, folks, again, part-time divided into 3 components, just like I alluded to, and we serve on a part-time basis. But there are full-time reservists, what's called Class B, and then Class C when you deploy overseas. Next slide. Who we are. The Rocky Mountain Rangers, location in Prince George in Kamloops. Kamloops Regimental Headquarters. Prince George is Bravo Company, B Company. We have approximately 65 soldiers in Prince George. Prince George doesn't have a home per se. We rent a school from the school district and we retrofit it into a federal armory. It's got a weapons lockup and it's got a whole bunch of stuff in there that makes soldiers do what soldiers do in there. Our unit strength is approximately 170. We were established in 1908. Prior to that, we were independent rifle companies in there. So that's our genesis during the March West with General Middleton, the Real Rebellion. We had companies in Selmo, Nelson, Prince George, Kamloops. We had a platoon in Merritt in here. So as such, our history in the interior BC is rich in there. So we augment tasks to the regular force, Afghanistan, Bosnia, the former Yugoslavia, the 2010 Olympics, 2003 fires in Kelowna, and various United Nations missions. Lieutenant McMillan has been on operations in the Caribbean there. I've been to Cyprus, keeping the peace between the Greeks and the Turks on the island of Cyprus. I've been to Iraq, Jordan, and Afghanistan myself. I was the last battle group to leave Afghanistan. Our unit composition, folks, regimental headquarters in Kamloops, Alpha Company, Kamloops, Bravo Company in Prince George, and we have 11, actually that should be 7 now, actually, that's our typo. We have 7 cadet corps. Now the cadet corps, they're part of the Canadian Forces, but they're a part of the youth organization because ever since the United Nations declared the Declaration on Youth and Soldiers, that totally changed in regards what their paradigm is. They focus on youth, they focus on adventure training more than skill of arms. Now, the British cadets in the British Army, totally different. They're focused on skill of arms in there. And that's our building, 1221 McGill Road in there. It was built in 1984. There's 2 other armories across Canada that have it. One on Southern Ontario, the second one is in Windsor, Nova Scotia. And we've totally outgrew it infrastructure-wise in there. 1916, the Rocky Mountain Rangers, coming from where we are, the Rockies there. Before that, we were the 172nd Battalion of the Rocky Mountain Rangers and part of the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Our history is very rich. We went overseas, but we never went folks overseas as a foreign unit. We went overseas to augment General Curry's 1st Canadian Corps, for lack of a better word. And we were piecemealed in there as such, so we weren't a foreign unit. So a lot of the battle honors we have 7 now, where a lot of the units, you'll see some of their colors or flags, for lack of a better word, they'll have an enormous amount of battle honors. That's because they went over as a foreign unit, if that makes sense. And that was taken in Vernon. Kiska, 1943. The only place where the Japanese Imperial Army invaded the North American continent. I'm seeing a few head shakes there. A lot of historians, absolutely. They did invade North America. The Aleutian Island chain, it's a very desolate, barren land there. It's basically between, in the Bering Strait, and then Vladivostok, and in between Pacific, there it is, in there. I haven't seen it, I've seen a lot of videos of it in there. So Kiska, the regiment did participate in that, on the islands of Kiska and that too. And as such, every year we have the soldier dinner called the Kiska dinner. And thank you so much, that's where it is right there. Thank you. Whoever did that, my compliments, thank you. And overworked, absolutely. Slide. When did we work? Well, be careful what you wish for. I joined the Army in 1981. Hopefully I don't look it. Not at all. Not at all. Thank you for the kind words. I spent time in the regular Army, then gave back in the reserves, and I started as a private, right? And I commissioned from the ranks, and lo and behold, 37 years later, the Governor General, the Chief of Defense Staff, then decided that to give me command orders to command a unit. I was also the last man standing, so.
You don't need to tell us that.
but I say that tongue in cheek. So we parade 3 or 4 weekends a month, as such. Sorry, weekends a month. Wednesday nights is our normal training night, or drill nights. The term drill is a term it's a turn of the century where soldiers drilled in drill hall. If you go to Enderby, you'll see the Enderby Drill Hall. It's called the Enderby Drill Hall because soldiers drill, but we don't do a lot of drill. The Rocky Mountain Rangers are not pretty soldiers, I'll tell you that, Your Worship. So one weekend a month we have an exercise, and it goes from 1900 hours until Sunday afternoon. And our main training area, or our main schoolhouse, we call it, is the Chilcote. And we go there and we do all our drills. We're an infantry unit, so in the Army we have infantry. Basically those are dudes and dudettes that carry heavy weight on their back and they walk, right? Then you have armored, who have our armored vehicles, artillery, they fire artillery pieces. Then you have service corps who service in regards to what makes them going. But those are the main, and of course we can't forget combat engineers and signals. There's possibility for additional work days during the week, and I have a budget for pay, and I have a budget for O&M in regards to upkeep and everything. So a certain amount of budget is given to me as a commanding officer under the Financial Administration Act, and I've been honored to look after that expeditiously as I possibly can in there. During the summer months, soldiers can volunteer for tasks in the training courses and at one of the training centers across Canada. Because we're Army, we're infantry, our training centers aren't, again, the prettiest, if I can use that term again. Places like Wainwright, Gagetown, Petawawa, Belcartier, right? Good family vacation spots, right? Not the Adirondacks or the Thousand Islands and Gananoque we're talking about. Benefits of joining the Army Reserves. The Army Reserve says there, offers a unique part-time job. Works around your average in school. As a commanding officer, when I took over in 2018, I've been given a year extensions because September there's nobody in the breach to take over. So the boss says, "You're willing to do an extra year?" I said, "Of course I do." Right? I work in Kelowna, live in Kamloops, and live out of my vehicle. Pretty sad. Right? But no, I thoroughly enjoy it. Yeah. So during the summer months, my point being is that my big priorities is number one is your family's health is number one in my unit. Because if you haven't got health and family, you have nothing. That's just the cold hard facts. Your job or your school is second because you have to have a vocation, and schooling puts you in a position where you can excel. And then if you have find time for that, then come and join us and work with us. So I'm very flexible. So I think the days in which you have to parade every Wednesday or you're on the Santa Claus naughty list, if I can use, is gone. All right. The priority is family health. That's mine. Now, whoever takes over from my chair could have a different paradigm. During the summer months, we train at the different training center courses in there. So as of when the war started in Afghanistan, 11 years. They'll probably won't ever do that again, but it was quite the experience, I can tell you that. We had two tiers. The reserves were trained one way, and the regular army was trained another. Basically, they're kind of like they worked in silos in regards to they basically met the different end states. But then when we were involved in full kinetic operations in Afghanistan, fighting an insurgency, everybody had to be trained to level. And because of that training model and paradigm now, it's a plug-and-play concept. So I'm trained the same as a lieutenant colonel in the regular army, except he is 10 years younger than me. That's just the cold hard facts. Yeah, that's exactly it, right? So a lieutenant in the army, in the reserves, trained the same as a lieutenant in the regular army. They do it full time, right? So when we augment, there's always that bit of a catching up process in order to meet there. Our pay is competitive. Ours is 95%. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Is it 95%? Approximately 95% of the wages of the full-time regular Army folks. So it's very competitive. There's dental, there's health, there's education allowances and bonuses that members can apply for, and it's fantastic in there. There's travel benefits in regards if you live more than think, 15 kilometers, you can go. On dental insurance, reimbursement program for school fees, and maximum to $8,000 during your career. And slide. Minimum requirements, be a Canadian citizen, 18 years of age or 17 years of age with parental consent, must have completed grade 10 matriculation. We see very seldom that. Everybody either has a grade 12 dogwood or they're coming in with undergraduate degrees, diplomas, technical skills. So we get people that join the reserves. We get the young dudes and dudettes from 16, 17, they want to do all that cool stuff, right? Then you have the folks that have families, that have a job sort of thing, that always wanted to do it, but they put their family and job first, and now they're saying, you know what, I'm stabilized. My little boy's not tugging at my shirt anymore. I can go play, right? So, absolutely. Right, and that's exactly it. And then we have the third person that has finished a career, his family says, you know what, I want to serve. I want to be twice a citizen. So that's the 3 tiers of folks that we get. Slide. Afghanistan, kind of dear to my heart. I was the last battle group over there. Not the nicest place to visit in there. And I'm certainly not a politician or make any comments on what's happening now. Everybody here can check on WW whatever, and you can see what's happening there. Slide. Iraq and Kuwait. That's one of my officers there. He's a Prince George captain. His first name's Eric. Just for operational security, we'll call him Captain Eric in there. I hope you don't mind. And he's over there, and he's doing a lot of different jobs there, and he's there, and he's totally enjoying it. It's his first tour. He's been in the unit for 9 years. He's got a beautiful lady. They just had a daughter, and just finished his Master's of Business Administration in there. And on Civvy Street, he works for one of the MLAs. Incredibly gifted young man, like rock star in there. Slide. France, 2019. In 2019, I had the pleasure of taking the regiment over to France, and one of our missions there was to visit all our battle honors, which we have on our regimental colors, and also finding Freddie. Freddie, who's Freddie? Freddie Lee was a machine gunner, if I may. Yes. Freddie was a machine gunner, and he was from Asian descent, incredibly brilliant, went to Biddy Elementary School in Kamloops, and he excelled in mathematics. And he excelled in mathematics. His family worked hard. And as such, because he excelled in mathematics, he went to the machine gun platoon, because with machine gun, it's an indirect weapon system. Not to get into a tactics course there, but it's indirect, and there's a bit of science, there's a bit of trigonometry in regards to what you get the best effects. It's amazing how we've evolved in 500 years. So, but yeah, so Freddie was in machine gun platoon, went to France. I got killed at the Second Battle of Be bad. The Somme or Reeves. And so as a result of that, the Chinese Multicultural Society in Vancouver really wanted to get this program. At the same time, there was a national initiative for Hill 70, which was one of our battle honors. There was a nexus between there. So Senator Vivian Choi and some prominent people from the Bay Street region there, they had an initiative on there. It was granted by the Canadian government. And in 2019, I took a full rifle platoon over to France to visit all our battle honors. It was absolutely fantastic. And I can say that very seldom that I was tongue-tied or had a tear coming in. I'm not gonna mince words when I marched the soldiers through the Menin Gate, right? And the Menin Gate is the gate in Belgium that where soldiers couldn't be put to rest. Their names are in there, and it's if you Google Menin Gate, it's you'll get a bit of a tear. I'm not going to lie to you. So 2019 was just a memorable year. We connected with some of our communities that are on our battle honors, and there is a motion that right now, or an initiative right now, in order for us to go over to exercise the freedom of the city. And freedom of the city is an ancient old tradition that goes back to medieval times, where city-states were in gates, and soldiers couldn't just come in there because, I hate to say, soldiers in the 1200s had a real lousy reputation, pillaging, burning, stealing, and a few other things which I won't mention, right? So before they were given the freedom of the city, in other words, to go in, they had to be, a trust had to be reposed in them. And part of that trust was, basically on your honor, yada, yada, and they were allowed to come in the city, drums beatings, colors flying, bayonets fixed, or pikes at that time in there. So those two cities are going to hopefully give us the freedom of the city. We have the freedom of the city of Kamloops, Prince George, Roslyn, but we don't have the freedom of the city of Merritt, Your Worship.
Ooh, maybe we'll have to fix that.
Gone fishing.
Like that, in there. But yeah, and okay, slide. We do a lot of training. We have a lot of specialty people in our unit. We have people who've done a lot of reconnaissance. Myself, Lieutenant Des McMillan brings in a naval intelligence piece in it, because that's his background. I have ex-special forces dudes in my unit as well, for lack of a better word. And on this exercise here, my soldiers are learning how to track in there. So these are skill sets that are portable in any block and venue now, if that makes sense. Slide. 2021, same as 2003, 2021, 2003, 2017, and 2021, horrific years for fires. The operation is called Operation Lentus, and we're called a town or city who wants the military to go in there. They do what's called a request for assistance. And Des, you maybe want to maybe touch on that? Sure. Because Des was heavily involved in this, and I just want to turn that because he's a bit of a subject matter expert in this.
Thank you. As you know, the 2021 fire season was terrible. Merritt was surrounded by 3 fires, I think. I was actually, I went on Oplentis 2021, or that's 21-4. So I was actually stationed up in 100 Mile House for the large fire, the Flat Lake fire there. But we did our training down in Chilliwack, and then we went to the White Rock Lake fire at the end of that. So you would have seen that in the newspapers about that. And so basically what we acted as, we acted as augmentees for the BC Wildfire Service. We had about 65 members, and we would just go to the front lines with the wildfire equipment and do mop-up or patrolling, and then we would just act, we just followed their directions basically, because they know what they're doing fighting fires. We know how to dig things and put water places and help out that way. So that was our contribution. There was also the Air Force was in Kamloops, and they provided logistical support with helicopters and planes as well. So that was the Canadian Forces contribution for the summer for the wildfires. And I know we had to drive through the Coquihalla a few times. We know it was closed, and we know your community, it was probably on the forefront of your mind this whole summer. We were actually hoping to come out here in July. I was talking with Linda there, but however, everybody's summer it looks like it got pretty busy. So thanks for hearing from us now, and yeah, that's forest fires for you. And and just to talk about, so what happens is the province makes a request to the federal government, and then the federal government says how, if they're going to support or how, and then we get told what we're doing if we volunteer. So the good thing is, this summer there was community members from Vernon, Kamloops, Prince George, the Lower Mainland. There was probably about 60, 70 people from BC that got to help out in their local community. They're all volunteers. And if they had continued the RFA into September, there would have been another 100 people, 50 of them from Kamloops, volunteering to help with the fires. So it's a good way for people in the community to be able to help out if there's need. I've been able to do flooding in Calgary, helped out with an earthquake in New Zealand. So there's also lots of opportunities, sadly, sometimes to help out. But as a community member, as you guys know, because you serve your city, it's good to be able to give back and have that to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Des. And next slide, please. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. That's our final slide. That's a LAV 3, now LAV 6 armored vehicle. Spent months and months of it in Afghanistan. It's like a tin can. And you hope there's enough armor that protects anything that goes boom underneath. And yeah, so
Got
again,
that in the
that's,
parking lot?
sorry.
Got that in the parking lot?
Can you bring it with you? Is it in the parking lot?
Yeah, I wish. But no, thank you for viewing our humble presentation. Ma'am, Your Worship, I open the floor to yourself or any of the folks here, and I look forward to taking any questions or there, and very keen, hopefully, giving you all the answers.
Councillor Baker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I've looked into Army Reserve and Air Force Reserve a few times now. If one does desire to join a reserve, where do they inquire?
Well, you can go on a recruiting force recruiting website, or you can phone our recruiter. We have a recruiter in Kamloops and one in Prince George. Always willing to take messages, and we immediately get back within 48 hours in there without haste. That's my direction to them in there.
Do you have a number?
I'll give you a number by the end of the night.
Sure, thanks.
Without question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And do we have a local cadet unit
We do.
here that is?
We do. So the Rocky Mountain Rangers, there's 7 cadet corps in BC right now who wear my cap badge. When I say my cap badge, it's not Amadeo's cap badge. It's the badge that's been, it's the seat that I sit as a commanding officer, right? So there's 7 cadet corps, and Merritt has one. So the cadet corps are a youth movement here, and 30 years ago, cadets were a feeder to the reserves, but that's not the case anymore. I don't know, maybe the appetite isn't there, or maybe it's a different culture sort of thing. But we get very little few cadets joining my regiment.
Councillor.
That's an interesting, have you any idea why that would be? That's interesting.
That's a good question, Councillor. It's like when I joined many years ago, when I wasn't as charming as I am now. And I have a bit of a witty humor, that's what keeps me alive. 32 years of policing. I think now that their program is more adventure training sort of thing, more of away from the lock and load and
Paramilitary piece.
yeah, it is. But in there, they can join at 16 in there, right? Up to 16, 17 with parental consent in there. It's a way. The more the unit gets involved with the cadet corps, the more the cadet corps is exposed to the unit, and the young people see that, okay, that's kind of different, that's kind of neat. That interaction, and young people, the more they talk to each other, then you get that interaction in there.
It was because it was interesting. I find it interesting you say Britain ignored the UN Declaration. It sounds like.
Well, I didn't say that.
No, you did. I don't know. Do they have the same rate?
Yeah, so
absorption problem?
In England, the way it works, they have the ACF. I'm a bit of an academic because I teach, so forgive me. They have the ACF and the CCF, the Army Cadet Force and the Combined Cadet Force. The Combined Cadet CCF is part of the schools. So it's schools in England. The British Army and English culture is like bread and butter, right? Of course, right? So as such, the schools, they have a cadet program in there. Their headmaster is their cadet major in there, right? So they're inculcated in those values at such a young age. The Army Cadet Force is similar to the Canadian cadets, but instead of doing adventure training, they do everything. They use the British Army SA-80 rifle. They repel from helicopters. They do gas training. They go to Warminster, which is one of the big training centers in the British Army. They pretty much do all that stuff. That's their culture, that's theirs. When we send Canadian cadets on exchanges there, I can tell you unequivocally, so there's no misunderstanding, our cadets cannot participate in full. They get basically an introduction to the British cadet system and all that, to the British Army.
Yeah.
But we have the escorts for those cadets, young people, they get clear lanes on what they can and can't do.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that's the cut to the quick in regards to how the British cadets work.
Look, I have to be honest, if I'm a young kid and I'm going to join the cadets, there's a reason I'm joining the cadets. I want to play with the toys.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
So,
and there's nothing matter with that, but I think,
No.
yeah, but I think over the years, if I can be bold, is that people in charge have forgotten why join sort of thing, and they have to know that there are lanes when young people are.
Right.
You have to invigorate young people with what they want to, but at the end, they have to make that choice. Right? If that makes sense, sir.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Thank you for that.
Now, is there a school in Edmonton, a high school specifically related to cadets?
There is. And of course, please forgive me, I've had one of those moments at my age. I'm in there. That school really has a huge military nexus to it in there. So when they these kind of a co-op program in there. So when they finish school, some of their grades will, when they join the reserves or the regular army, puts them a bit of a step over, 100% in there. And that's the only school. The other one is in Ontario.
Provincially funded.
Sorry?
And it's provincially funded.
Correct. And the other one is in Ontario. It's called Land Academy. If you Google it, it's called Land Academy. I forget the first name. And it's based on a military ethos system in there. So yeah, those are the only schools per se. Whereas in the United States, it's totally different. There's Virginia Military Academy. There's a whole bunch of Southern Cross Military Academy. And those are prep schools to go to West Point or Annapolis in there.
But this is a high school. But
I'm sorry?
this is a high school I was referring to.
Yes, the high school, absolutely.
I know my girlfriend had her daughter enter this particular high school. That's the only reason I know about
Yep.
it.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Councillor Christopherson? Or
Yes, thank
comments?
you. I was just wondering, when schools do their career days or job programs.
Job fairs?
Yeah. Do they have to request the armed forces to
They can
participate?
Yes, they do, and thank you, and that's a very good question. They do, and we do as well, so it's a duality of asks, for lack of a better word. We have to be careful in schools, those sort of things. We have to get that ask from them if they want to, and as a result of that, we will go there. But when we go there, we have to make sure we get permission, we follow certain protocols in there in regards to what we're trying to, like, the same as somebody who wants to go in the trades or a pilot, we're another career in there. So we just have to be mindful and respectful in regards to the procedures and protocols.
Yeah, I was curious because sometimes youngsters are at that level where they might be interested in something like the reserve officer training program and the career in the armed forces and so on. But if they're not exposed to it, they don't know anything about it.
It's 100%. Years ago, there was a commercial on TV, and I think, see if anybody here remembers that. Remember that commercial says there's no life like it?
Yeah.
Right? It had that nice little jingle to it. There's no life like it in there. It doesn't exist anymore. There's the more commercials they have now are more, what's the right word? More benign, I guess, in there as such. So to answer your question, absolutely. The only way that young people want to get into a career, is for us to go to them in there. So schools is a good place for them there. And we do presentations in there, both in visual form, and there's lots of pamphlets, and there's lots of people we can talk to in there. Our recruiters are incredibly well trained. They're not just folks as a secondary duty, that's their primary job in there. They're trained to a very high standard. Reserve recruiters are trained at the same standards as the regular force recruiters. Absolutely, and they have to take lots of aptitude training and a lot of interviewing skills, and they get trained by BPSOs, which is base personnel selection officers. These are people who have master's and doctorate degrees who actually know how to, when somebody wants to do a trade, they get into it and they ask all those questions. They're like super HR people in there. So absolutely. So we've really upped our game in the last 40 years. When I joined in 1981.
I'm glad they're still doing it. I know I taught in Merrick for many years, and I know several students who have gone through were introduced to it basically through the high school job fairs.
Absolutely, and the thing too is that you get two streams that when it comes to high school. people that want to join the military as a kind of either regular and be a non-commissioned officer, an NCM as we call, or be a reservist, and the people who want to have a professional career and they want to go to RMC in Kingston. Years ago, they had Royal Roads Military College, RMC in St. Jean. Well, now Royal Roads now is Royal Roads University, and RMC is Royal Military College of Canada in Kingston, and St. Jean, or CMR as it's called, has about 10 years ago came back in there. So the opportunities are endless in there. So you get a 4-year bachelor degree program, and then you have to serve 7 years out of that to Queen and Country, which isn't bad. It goes by quickly.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Your Worship. Before we leave, we have a small presentation. We have some pins that we got made when we went to France. If I can leave a small handful for you and members on council there.
Awesome.
They're kind of miniature gold inlaid pins with 3D with our regimental cap badge on it. And wear it with pride or put it in a favorite swag box, whatever the case may be. Absolutely. But thank you on behalf of the regiment for allowing myself and Lieutenant McMillan to come and grace you. And yeah, absolutely. The history of merit, before I leave, Your Worship, is in the 80s. We had a platoon in merit. A lot of First Nations members were part of that platoon in there. And and it's the connection of merit and Kamloops has always been close sort of thing. And what I'm trying to do over the years now that I've been the CO sort of thing is rebuild those relationships that have been lost purely out of we're all working in separate, like we're all firing in a whole bunch of cylinders in there. But those connections that brought us together sort of thing. And I think that that's part of one of my roles that I want to do in there.
And if I recall, the merit cadets have been around from the 60s, if not before the 60s.
Yes.
I knew of them around the 60s.
Absolutely.
But it's nice to hear they're still there, maybe not in great numbers, but.
Absolutely. But thank you again on behalf of the regiment for allowing myself and Lieutenant McMillan to kind of give you our, not a spiel sort of thing, but just kind of tell you who we are. We are the infantry unit in the interior of British Columbia. In Kelowna, there is the British Columbia Dragoons, which is an armed reconnaissance, right? They drive into battle, we block. We're a light infantry unit, but tell me where the light comes into the infantry, right? But again, thanks again for having us. It was wonderful, and I hope to see you soon. And our doors are always open on McGill Road and in Prince George.
Well, thank you very much for accommodating our change of timing.
Right on.
And,
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Safe drive home.
Thank you, kindly.
We're on to new business, I hope. 9.1, Nicola Valley Museum and Archives lease. Ms. Brick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Since 1983, the Nicola Valley Museum and Archives facility has provided an opportunity for residents and visitors to explore the history of the Nicola Valley and its people. The building is owned by the City of Merritt, and it's operated by the Nicola Valley Museum and Archives Association. Since 2016, the lease has expired. The operations have continued on a month-to-month basis. The proposed agreement that you're considering this evening is for a 3-year term with a 3-year renewal option. There are no proposed changes in the agreement. It would be as it was.
Sorry, Your Worship, my apologies, sorry.
Staff have consulted with the Nicola Valley Museum and Archives Association to confirm that they wish to continue with the lease agreement. The options that Council considered this evening are to direct staff to enter into a new lease agreement, or you could opt to direct staff to renegotiate one or more terms of the agreement. You could direct staff to terminate the agreement, or you could receive this report for information and make no changes at this time and just continue on a month-to-month lease. The rate that the lease is proposed on is $1 per annum, which is consistent with other facilities where services are being offered to the community. And I'm available for questions, as is Mr. McEwen.
And because it is a $1 per annum, we are required to give public notice of this assistance that we provide to
Yes,
this
you are.
organization.
Yes, that is correct, Your Worship. So what we would do is advertise into issues of the Merritt Herald to provide residents an opportunity to ask questions about this or to discuss it and just to provide notice.
And are there any questions for Ms. Burke? Is there any debate on this issue? Councillor Christopherson.
Just want to say that I think that the Nicola Valley Archives Association really provides an invaluable service to the people of Merritt and keeping our historical documents and the ways that they're preserving things now is quite astounding. So I think they do an invaluable service to the city of Merritt.
And Councillor Adjourned.
Yeah, I also just wanted to make a comment about the museum because I attend some of their meetings as the liaison with the city, and so they're really working hard at trying to update a lot of the information that they can provide to citizens with fiche, and if you want to find an artifact or some history items, and if anybody enjoys history, it's quite fascinating. So they're trying to drive a lot of traffic there. So I think renewing this the way it is great. They're trying to encourage visitors coming there, tours and groups, and I think whatever we can do to help them would be appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor White.
I agree with Councillor Christopherson and Councillor Etchart, and I've been in touch with the manager there, Cameron. He's doing a great job of getting all the information into a new computer system they have, and he's also writing stories about some of the displays that they have in the museum, and I think that's a big benefit to them, and he says that he's seeing extra visitors in there in the last while, so I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. Councillor Bengu.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councillor White and Councillor Etchart. I was in the museum the other day. It's a great little place to spend 30 minutes, an hour, go for a little tour around. So I would encourage Marizonians to visit our museum. I think we're very lucky to have the facility that we do and the stuff inside. Thank you.
I just had one question, and it's pretty moot, but on number 20, page 54, we've got the city shall have the right to re-enter in the event of non-payment of rent. I mean, they're paying $1 a year. From a legal perspective, is that clause still necessary?
I'm going to defer to...
Yeah. It doesn't do anything. Right of re-entry is boilerplate. It's a fair read. Doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything one way or the other. Though you can take it out and leave it in.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So I'm assuming that we need a mover, that council directs staff to enter into the Nicola Valley Museum and Archives lease agreement. So Luck and Christopherson. And any comments on this? Yep, I guess, good. Okay, and all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Oh, now we're at notices of motion.
Your Worship, strictly speaking, there's another part of that recommendation, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is recommendation number 2, that looks of it. But we've said that they used to go together, right? That the corporate officer be directed to provide notice accordingly in accordance with section 24 of the community charter. Luck and Hitchart. And all in favor? Opposed, none, carried. Depends on what page I'm on. Okay, so now we're at notices of motion. See none, moving to reports from council. Okay. I just have a reminder for council to check the Sylvia email that we've had over the last few days inviting us to the Lower Mainland LGA virtual conference. There's just information on it for us. Information items. This is in regards to our, I don't know where my last page of the agenda is. In regards to the cannabis distance. And does anyone want to pull this and look at it, or we asked staff to compare our, I should ask Mr. Lois to give us the staff report rather than me trying to give it. Thank you.
Your Worship, if you want me to just sit here quietly, I'm sure I can find a way to do that. As you said, this came out of your notice of motion on September 21st. Council unanimously voted to request this information update, which has therefore been provided to you. So what I did on this was just pulled up a list of BC municipalities and just went up and down, got 6 slightly larger ones than us, 6 slightly smaller ones, and stuck them all together in a table. And I was very entertained when I did that to realize that the buffer zones range from 0 to 300 meters and Merritt's max out at 150, so we are literally right smack dab in the middle. So as a result of that, although there are a variety of options to buffer zones ranging all the way down from none at all to a reasonable increase from where Merritt currently is, but because we didn't seem to be an outlier or unusual in any particular way, we didn't feel there was a staff recommendation that could be made on this. Obviously, as council, if you have any changes that you would like to make to the zoning bylaw, it is entirely within your purview to request that we draft those and bring those forward. But if you were to do that in this case, then we would probably be asking you to look at, say, one of these similar municipalities or another one and say that you are interested in modeling something after one of those.
What are the wishes of council? Councillor Luck.
I too had a chuckle when I read through this. I just couldn't believe it. Like, who came up with this idea of buffer zones? Because there's no consistency. There's nothing here. Quite frankly, I think our staff have better things to do right now than worry about a buffer zone that we're within it, without it, or anything right now. So I don't have any appetite to entertain this at the moment. So I know we've got a lot of other work that needs to be done. So that's my comment.
Councillor Richard.
Information like this is interesting because there's always important work to do. People bring up comments about bylaws that can be concerned. The worry about animals ending up in town because, feeding of animals, which is a problem in Stanley Park in Vancouver. So, of course, there's always going to be more important things to do, but this is also important to the businesses that are trying to grow. We have the 2 active stores in Merritt, so having a consideration for something like this can protect the businesses that have invested the money for the $7,500 or whatever the fee was to be vetted by the government, and really give them some consideration as well, because for what they're paying to get a license, if 2 more stores open within 150 feet, they may feel that, or 150 meters, they may feel that they're not being supported for their investment in trying to bring jobs and other options to the city. I don't know, just a thought anyway.
And the reason I brought this to us to ask staff to do this was because we've had a lot of complaints during the last public hearing where people did not want, it wasn't just the cannabis stores themselves. It was also the community saying there's enough of them now. They're too close together already. Councillor Fair.
Yeah, I agree with much of specifically what Councillor Luck has said, that this is, there's probably been enough discussion on this, and just the fact that the buffer zones vary so wildly that I don't think there's really any objective way of saying whether or not a buffer zone helps or does not help. There's probably business arguments on both sides of the coin saying that, you know, having more than one business in an area makes it more of an attraction, thereby creating more traffic, which could help those businesses. So for me, this is definitely not something we're spending much more time on.
Councillor White.
I think I think every community has its own. I don't know what the right word is. Their own landscape of what they've got going on in their community. And in our situation, we already have two down a 2-block or 3-block main street in our town, and without some kind of rules, we've got no limit on how many can go in. So if 3 more want to open down there, then we're going to end up with a whole street of cannabis stores without any kind of buffer zone.
Mr. Lewis.
Forgive me, Your Worship, but through you to Councillor White, I would like to just remind you that Council is required to undergo a consultation before any new cannabis licence would be issued in the city. So it is always up to Council to decide that you feel, on whatever basis you like, that a new store in any particular location would not be beneficial to the community, and to therefore make a negative recommendation to the LCRB. And if a negative recommendation was made, then the store would not be allowed to be opened. So just to reassure you that you do retain, in whatever happens, a degree of control over the process.
Having said that, can I ask a question on the one that has been outstanding in my mind? They still have a lease on one of our buildings downtown. That's a rumor I heard, that it may not be factual. We're talking about...
Allow us to check our records, Your Worship. It is my understanding that all of the existing applications that were in place where there had been approvals have now been rescinded. I think that was Opal and Hive that have both come off, but allow us to double check that, but that's my understanding as to what's transpired.
Okay, thank you. And there doesn't seem to be an appetite. We don't have a mover or a seconder moving into any motion at this point, so that'll be it at this point in time. And hopefully I'll get back to you. Hopefully you will check that detail for us. Did you have a
well, I was just going to comment on something that Councillor Etcher brought up, and I agree with him on the one point, is that, you know, the work that staff does was not for naught, I don't think. I think it's really good to show the public that, look at it, throw a dart. Throw a dart. Because if we're going to sit here any longer and talk about this, I'm going for Penticton's model. 0 buffers.
I'm sorry.
So I want to end it right here. Thank you.
Seeing that concludes our session for this evening, and so this meeting is adjourned.